All right, thank you everybody for coming out tonight. My name is Kevin McDermott. I'm the Deputy Director of Planning here at Albemarle County and the Project Manager for the Greenhouse Trail Shared Use Path Master Plan. We're really excited to be here. This is our second public meeting, and I'm really happy to see this kind of turnout. So thank you all for taking your time. I'm glad to see everybody's interested in this, and I just wanted to make sure that everybody knew that if you're looking for someone from the county that you would like to talk to about these things, I'm happy to be that person. You can come up with me at this meeting, and my information is available on the website as well. So you're welcome to contact me through that. Just real quick, so you know, the bathrooms, if you need them, the women's is over here in this corner, and the men's is in that corner next to the two TV screens. So with that, we're just going to do a quick presentation. I'm going to pass it off to our project manager from the consultant team, Krista Witt here, and thanks again for being here.
What a great turnout for this exciting project. Thanks for coming out tonight and talking to us. My name is Chris, and I'm the project manager for the consulting team. As Kevin said, I'm with VHB, and I'm here with our consulting partners, EPR and Group Design, who will all be part of this presentation. Quick agenda. We'll talk a little bit about the project background. I know most people are familiar with the project, but we wanted to give a little bit of project history, and then really talk to you about the process we've been going through to develop the route options that you see on the displays tonight. And that's what these are. They're route options. We want your input on the pros, cons, what you like, don't like, might want to change about some of these options. But we'll talk about the process and how we arrive at these options. We'll then take a quick break, and not a break, but we'll switch over from the consultant team to a couple of guest speakers to hit on a couple of key issues. And then the bulk of the meeting, we want to do what folks have already done, and I see a lot of great notes already on the boards, and that's really what we want tonight, is a back and forth discussion, interact with the maps, ask questions, and most importantly, leave us your comments. What do you like, dislike, or want to change about these route options that we're showing? Again, I think most people are familiar with the Three-Notch Trail project as a concept, but it's been in planning documents, it's been talked about in the community for at least a decade. In 2021, a petition was signed, and then in 2022, the county was able to secure some grant funding to develop this master plan, to talk about how you would do a trail connection from Charlottesville to the Blue Ridge Tunnel. We talk about this as a shared use path. We use the term trail, multi-use path, shared use path interchangeably sometimes, but this is really a shared use path. So it's for bikers, walkers, joggers, rollerbladers, variety of people to use, physically separated from vehicles. So if you look at the maps tonight and you see a line that appears to be on a road, it's not actually on the road. It's just trying to follow that corridor, stay within the right-of-way where possible, but generally follow that alignment, but be physically separated from the vehicular travel lanes. Shared use paths are usually at least 10 feet wide. We try to make them wider where we can to get more space for users. And they're usually asphalt. Not always. They can be like a crushed stone material, a more rustic material, as long as it is accessible and hard surface and suitable for multiple users. So you can see a couple of examples of where these have been built in other places in Virginia. And where this happens, they provide distinct benefits for the community. They provide outdoor recreation opportunities, commuting and connection opportunities, promote tourism and economic development. So that's really the idea here, is to provide this facility to benefit the community while connecting from Charlottesville to the Blue Ridge Tunnel. I want to point out that we're in a master plan study now, so we're not to the stage where we're doing final design, we're looking at property acquisition, or even doing construction yet. We're really trying to determine what is the preferred route. So you see route options throughout the displays tonight. We use your input, additional technical analysis, scoring against the screening criteria to try to narrow those options down to one preferred route for that 25-mile corridor. After we do that, and we'll come back to you and present that to you based on the input we get tonight, we want to look at what are the opportunities for phasing this project. It's very unlikely that this thing could be built in one fell swoop. So we want to look at priority sections for phasing. We'll be doing some construction cost estimating. But right now, we're at the stage where we're really trying to get your input to help us determine what is the preferred route. Which of these options do you like, and what would you change? Just emphasizing the project area, again, connecting from Charlottesville to the Blue Ridge Tunnel, generally through Crozet. It's about a 24-mile corridor. We started out with data collection. We held an open house in May of this year. I suspect many of you were at that. We introduced the project, tried to get some preliminary input. We'll talk about that. We coupled that with some technical data collection, some field visits, and we'll talk about that process. But that's what's led us to the route options that you see tonight. And that's where we are in this overall process, is evaluating those options, trying to come to consensus on a preferred route. Once we do that, we'll come back and present that, get your input on priority, phasing, and implementation. And with that, Amanda's going to talk a little bit about the community input process.
So as Chris mentioned, all of these options that you see today are based on a significant amount of community input, starting with the Active Mobility Summit back in March. We had over 200 people attend that. That was put on by the Piedmont Mobility Alliance. We have a technical advisory committee that's been guiding this process. They've met 3 times and have helped to really ground truth a lot of the options and ideas that we've heard so far to date. We had a public open house back in May at Crozet Elementary. About 150 people participated, so we were really excited about that amount of participation, and even more excited tonight to see so many of you here. We went out into the community and attended different events to promote an online survey. So you didn't have to just come to an event, an in-person event. You could share your thoughts and feedback online. We had almost 700 responses to that survey. And we've been asking people, what do you envision this trail to be? And so with all of that feedback, we've been able to develop these route options. Some of the things that we've heard, just so that you all know, safety and separation from traffic really was the #1 theme and priority that came out of that. People do not want to have to cross roadway crossings and really want to have a fully protected, car-free, separated route. The community also envisions the trail both as a recreation amenity and a transportation, so connecting neighborhood schools, businesses, and making sure that those are accessible to people of all ages and abilities. The trail could also highlight Albemarle's natural scenic beauty, so we've tried to provide options that do that as well. Participants requested tree cover, water access, and use of existing rights-of-way where possible. We really heard that people see this as being a game changer for the county, both for quality of life, but also tourism and economic development. Similar to the Virginia Capitol Trail or the Creeper Trail, many of those trails have had very positive impacts on the communities in which they're located. Lastly, people really want to see this thing get done. So don't want to be the enemy of the good. Phasing, having short wins, quick wins, and getting things done quickly is something that's very, very important to this community. Some of the challenges that we heard: property access, of course, steep terrain, and safe highway crossings or street crossings, particularly near Route 250 and Ivy Road. So those are just some of the things that we've heard and tried to reflect both in the route options, but also the criteria that we're going to be using to evaluate, to make a decision about the preferred option. I mentioned our technical committee. As I mentioned, they've met 3 times, most recently in October, where we took all of the public feedback as well as the technical analysis and shared a number of route options, most of which are reflected here, but with some refinements because of their knowledge to help make something that really truly is viable for you all to weigh in on. So we're really excited to get your feedback, and I'm going to turn it over to Joe.
Thank you, Amanda. Okay, let's again, it's wonderful to see everyone here tonight. What I'm going to be talking about is some of the hard work of making decisions on where the trail is going to go. When you're on the trail using it, it seems like such an easy and simple thing to do. It's just a linear path, and just throw some asphalt down and we're good to go. It's not true. It's not true. And I really appreciate everyone being here tonight to help us do the hard work of figuring out where it goes and how it's going to be built. So appreciate your extra time. One of the sort of analytical things we do in trying to determine where a preferred route is evaluate the various routes. Tonight we have about 3 for you to look at. And we create a set of criteria that we have heard throughout the planning process that's most important to you and most important to the implementers of the trail. And we distill that criteria down into words and definitions. And see some of the things that Amanda just talked about of what we heard early on in the process to help us rank factors that are going to determine what the most important sort of functions of the trail are for you all. During that process, we start drafting what that criteria is, what those words, what those definitions are that we hear most from you that will help us determine sort of create an analytical matrix process, essentially, to help be one of the tools that we narrow down to that preferred corridor. The terms that we heard most are pretty common, having done this for years all over the country. These are pretty universal in terms of some of the criteria that we hear. There are some of the definitions change, and that's what we'll talk about at our board tonight. We heard about connectivity, accessibility, constructability, user experience, safety, and community support. And as we ask you to go to that particular board this evening, I want to make sure everyone understands the definitions of those terms, because those are very big words and they could mean very bad things. So when we talk about connectivity, we're talking about sort of prioritizing the routes that connect to those commercial, residential, and those community destinations that people want to get to. So as you're thinking about and looking at all the different zones that we've set up and the preferred corridors, think about connectivity in that term. This is part of framing how you can sort of do the work of helping us select the preferred corridor to make. So that is where we're at with connectivity. With accessibility, we want to make sure it's 2 different things. Number one, it is accessible to those folks that can't always access these types of facilities. So we want it flat. We want the grade to be as low as possible. We want all ages and abilities, no matter what, to be able to use a facility like that, because that's when trails really work their best. We also want it close to where people can access it and get to it. So that we heard that as an important aspect as well. Constructability. This has a lot of different sort of elements to it, but kind of narrowing it down a little bit, we want to make sure that we're using as much public right-of-way as possible. We're connecting to those existing trail routes that are really emerging throughout this region and are quite popular, and making sure that we're being careful not to go into environmentally sensitive areas that could really require a lot of permitting and a lot of extra expense. So we want to make sure that it's doable from a construction perspective. So think about that as you're looking at each of these things. User experience. We want to make sure that we heard from you that you want beautiful places to go to. You want this trail to take you there. So we want to access the parks and the green space, and we want to make sure there's as few sort of crossings as possible to make that experience as pleasant as possible. And safety. Obviously, safety is high on everyone's mind in terms of feeling safe when you're on the trail, and making sure that everyone else on the trail is the eyes and ears of the management of that trail, as well as sort of the physical safety of crossing roadways or being close to roadways, making sure there's ample separation. So that physical safety is really important to folks as well. So again, as you're looking through each of the zones, think about safety in that particular way. And community support, that's why you all are here tonight. That's why we have been documenting everything we've heard from the very first meeting along the way, because we want this to be driven by what your desires are, and the only way we can know that, is to gather that information, assemble it, and aggregate it together. So we'll be doing that in our evaluation process. Now is the fun part. Henry's going to come up and talk about the route options that we've gotten to. He has the hardest part tonight. So he's going to explain all the different zones to you. So Henry, it's all you.
Yeah, this is what everyone came for, the route. My name's Henry. It's great to see you all. I'm going to try to come all the way over here. I went to Western. I grew up here, so it's great to be back. It feels very fun to be back here. This is where we started on this project. The open house in May, we rolled out blank maps, and we said, where should this trail go? We want to get any and every line that we could possibly have on here. We want to make sure that we're not missing anything. There's not a potential route that we're not looking at. And so this is where we started. We had this great May open house where we heard from so many folks. Great turnout, like we said. People drew all over those maps, left tons of sticky notes of trail should go here, connect to this school, beautiful view here, steep slope here, come here. Really, really great feedback. Also had really great feedback from the survey that helped us a lot to be able to get all of those lines on the map. And so we went from that to our workshop with our technical committee, where we took those same blank maps to them and said, hey, you all are experts in this area, you work in this community, you work in trails and development, you know this area really well. Help us draw these potential lines. Where could this trail go in our communities? And so that helped us go from a totally blank map to what we kind of call our spaghetti map of let's just put every possible line on the map and make sure that we're not missing anything. So that was kind of where we left off in the summer, but a big thing that came out of those meetings with you all and with the technical committee was we need more data on those maps to really help refine our decisions. So we met with a lot of folks over the summer, with the county, we met with VDOT, we met with the Water and Sewer Authority, we met with Buckingham Ranch Railroad, and we really added a lot more data to these maps to really get a feel for where are the stream corridors, where are the parcel lines, where are the utility corridors, all of those things to really make sure that all those lines that we were including on the map could be as accurate as possible. We also did a trip potential analysis this summer, and something that Jeff and Chris talked about was we want this trail to connect people to where they want to go. The hope is that this would be a place that people can access from their neighborhoods, that can get you, to school, get you to the park, get you where you're trying to go in the county. And so we looked at all of these different destinations across the county and were able to kind of develop this composite heat map of where are the places where we can have the most trip potential for this trail. One of the best parts about this summer was we also, as a team, spent 2 days doing field work and just driving all over the county to really kind of be out and ground truth our lines. It's one thing to see a line on the map, but I'm sure as all of you all know, that can be super steep, it can be super narrow, it can be treacherous, it can also be incredibly beautiful. And so it was great to be able to spend time this summer really making sure that we were out there. We wanted to reevaluate those places that we were unsure about, and then also confirm some of the routes that we knew we wanted to include as some of the route options on the trail. Here's some more great pictures from this summer, and you can see all the data that we collected across that whole corridor as we went. So then we began that difficult process of narrowing down that spaghetti map. We had every possible option. We really had to start narrowing down. So we looked at that additional analysis that we did. We looked at the trip potential analysis. And also we looked at all the community input from you all as well. And we really started to say, all right, what are the things that might lead us to say, all right, this was a great line. I'm glad we got it added at the open house, but there's really a better route right next to it. Or we had to choose in this area. We want to move on this line. So really the main things that we looked at when we were narrowing those routes were kind of these ones on the bottom, wanting to kind of minimize those impact that we're going to have on private property. So where is their public right-of-way, where is their HOA land, where are their county-owned land that we can make sure we got a route through those areas. Also wanted to look at the terrain a lot. It's very steep in a lot of these areas, and so we wanted to say, all right, of that spaghetti map, are there some that are slightly less steep that we could go in that direction rather than going directly up the side of the mountain. And then, of course, looking at crossings and safety, how do we, of all of those lines, pick the ones that have the least amount of crossings, or we're not directly going, along Interstate 64. So that helped us go from our map of a lot of lines, making sure we didn't leave any off the map, to ultimately being able to refine those and kind of move towards where we are this evening of having goal of 3 route options for the trail that we could come back together as a community and evaluate. When we talk about 3 route options, probably you can already tell from walking around here, there's not 3 individual, totally independent routes for the 3-notch trail, like, one to the north, one in the middle, and one in the south. It's more complicated than that, and they intercross and connect and split off from one another. And so what we've done to try to organize this and not have it feel too chaotic of all the different route options is to break it into zones and to take each zone at a time and say, can we think through 3 route options within this zone, 3 route options within this next zone, and what are the opportunities and challenges within that zone, and then bring all that back together to ultimately find a preferred route. And so that's kind of where we are today. You'll see, all of these boards have 3 route options in a zone, and the goal is to really be able to talk through what are the trade-offs between those. This is a map of what those zones look like. If you've been around the boards, you've already seen that. We have 6 zones for the corridor that go from Afton, Greenwood, Crozet, Ivy, Northridge, and then Charlottesville. I'm going to walk through the maps of each of these very quickly. You can try to squint your eyes and see up at the map. You're going to have a much better time just going to the stations and looking at the maps in a lot more detail. But hopefully as we walk through these, this will just get you a feeling of maybe which ones you want to make sure you go to first once we wrap up this part of the meeting. This is a map of kind of all those lines on the zones, so you can kind of see what each of these stations would look like all together. Starting out with our Charlottesville zone, which is over here, if you're curious where that is. We have 3 route options in Charlottesville, 1 to the north through kind of the UVA grounds to the Ravenna Trail, 1 in the center following kind of the Emmett-Ivy corridor at 250, and then 1 coming into Charlottesville to the south through Fontaine. Again, much more detail on all of these coasters. Our Northridge corridor only has 2 options, 1 again following 250 in the orange line there, and then 1 more close to the railroad tracks and kind of going behind some of those businesses off of 250. And I should mention too the extents of these, that goes from Boar's Head to the IVX line. Our Ivy zone goes all the way out to the 250, 240 roundabout that they're working on. Route A goes through some of the proposed trails that are going to be in the new Spring Hill development, and then kind of goes near Grassmere Road and Dry Bridge Road. Route C follows Morgantown Road and then along Ivy Creek, and Route B follows 250 through that area as well. And again, I'm moving fast. If you feel lost, look at where the extents are and go to the zone that you're most excited about. But wanted to make sure we gave an overview of all the routes, just so you could have a feeling of all of them together. In our Crozet zone, Route A really follows a lot of the great trails that you all already have in this area. It's really exciting that there's such great greenways already in Crozet, and so following those Crozet greenways from the Licking Pole Basin past Crozet Park and into downtown. Route B would follow 250 from that same interchange all the way to where we are tonight at Western and Old Trail Drive. And then Route C would split off and follow other existing Crozet greenways and kind of come more into Old Trail with opportunities for spur trails into downtown as well. Moving west from Crozet, getting into the Greenwood area, we have Route A that would go along Jarman's Gap Road and Greenwood Road. Route B uses a lot of the existing trails that are already in Old Trail and comes through King Family and out more towards the railroad tracks, Greenwood Station Road. And then Route C would go more to the west, kind of along the base of that mountain, with space hopefully alongside the railroad through that area. And then our final and steepest zone, getting out to Afton, all the way on that side of the road. We have 4 options here because there's a lot going on in this area, but again, you could follow Route 250 along option B there. A is staying more north, kind of following the contours along the railroad. Option C is sort of a connector between those 2. And then D comes along Stockton Creek and then makes its way, hopefully following contours, back up to the railroad there. So that was a whirlwind tour of our routes. Obviously, there's a lot of great things and challenges with each of those lines, and so that's really the hope this evening, is that you all are able to help us really talk about those trade-offs and say, hey, I love this about this route, I'm really concerned about this route, and we can work through all of those together. Before we get to our guest speakers, I wanted to just say, 2 quick things to reiterate about the routes. One is, like Chris said, a route that's on a road does not mean that it's going to be people walking and biking into the roads. Also wanted to just note that try to think about each route within each zone, and not necessarily like, oh, I picked the blue route in this zone, so now I'm stuck on blue into this zone. Or I was down on the south on this zone, and I like that, and now I'm stuck on this side. So try to go into each zone thinking through what do you see as the best opportunities and challenges, and then we'll compile all this data and really try to do the puzzle of pulling together a preferred route through all of these zones. But I'm going to turn it over to Allie to bring up some of our guest speakers.
We have two speakers that are going to talk briefly, and in addition to them giving a little summary now, both of them are going to be available to speak during the open house portion when we finish this presentation. So I know many of you will have questions for them because both of them have great experience to share. Our first speaker here is Rip Rickerke. He is the past president and current board member of the Rivanna Trails Foundation, and he joined specifically years ago to work on this 3-notch trail. He's been a lifelong supporter, but relevant to this conversation, he is a professor at UVA, and he teaches the conservation planning and law course and has a lot of experience in trails and liabilities. So coming up here, Rip, and share some words, please.
This is just fantastic to see such a large crowd. I mean, 15 years ago is when I started working on this project, and so this is a moment that's really meaningful to me. I want to start with just a disclaimer. So I want to make clear that I'm speaking this evening as a law professor and a longtime trail advocate. And so what I have to say, everything I say is for informational purposes only and shouldn't be thought of as legal advice. I advise you to consult a licensed attorney in the event that you are trying to make a decision about your property, and so I hope that you will do that. So the city and county eventually are going to be asking for easements to make this trail happen, and an easement is basically a permanent agreement that runs with the land to allow, in this case it would be access over that land for the purposes of the trail. And for the people who are getting access to their land, potential liability is a very understandable concern, right? I think it's fair to say that they might naturally ask, so I allow the public on my land to use a trail. Could someone get hurt and potentially sue me? And in my many years of working on trail projects, this is by far the most prominent concern that landowners express in trail development areas. And so, as it turns out, the Virginia legislature heard these concerns from their constituents. And way back in 1950, enacted a statute, the General Assembly enacted a statute to protect landowners from liability. And it's been amended and expanded many times over the years. It's commonly referred to as the recreational use statute, and it covers any property owner who opens their land for recreational use. So for our purposes, there is one provision that's really especially important. And so that provision is for a landowner who agrees with the locality to give access to the public for their land for recreational purposes. And so that's what I'm going to focus on here. I'm more than happy to talk to you about all of the statute. I have copies of it in case you want to work with me and put the language of the statute, which is quite a mess, frankly. But anyway, in this situation that I described, what the law does is three things. The first is that it makes the landowner immune from liability. This is really quite extraordinary, unusual, but it makes the landowner, it literally says, landowners immune from liability. Second, it requires the locality to indemnify and hold harmless the landowner. And that language may be unfamiliar to you. It basically means they have to insure the landowner for any claims that might be made against them. And then finally, it requires the locality to defend the landowner against any suits that might be brought in connection with the recreational uses by recreational users. So those are the provisions that are relevant to this project. And the Virginia Supreme Court has, in fact, said that the statute's purpose is to encourage landowners to open their land for public use. That is indeed what the statute was for. And the Supreme Court has suggested that it ought to be broadly interpreted to achieve that purpose. And so the Supreme Court has given it a very broad interpretation. Now, this is an exceptional level of legal protection for landowners, and I just want to emphasize that. Indeed, it is, I would say, one of the most protective statutes in the nation. Pretty much all 50 states have recreational use statutes, and Virginia's was indeed a model for many of them. Virginia's has been amended in ways that expanded quite substantially over the years. So it's a very, very protective statute. Now, I recognize that not everyone here is as fascinated as I am with the intricacies of the Virginia Code. And I also recognize that at least some of the terms that I've used may not be familiar to all of you. And so what I want to do is issue an invitation. Alice already mentioned it, but I'm going to be at one of these tables, I don't know exactly where, but somewhere or other, and I'd be more than happy to answer questions, additional questions, and also if you are a landowner and are interested, I can provide you with a highlighted copy of the statute that will guide you through thinking about this. And again, I would advise you to speak to your attorney before you sign the easement. So, sure.
So how many of you have been to the Capitol Trail in Virginia, the Virginia Capitol Trail from Richmond? Oh, great show of hands. So we're fortunate tonight to have Will Gillette here. He works with the Virginia Capitol Trail Foundation. For those of you who are not familiar with it, it's to me the gold standard of shared use paths in our area. It's pop over to Richmond. It's 51.7 miles long. It extends from downtown Richmond all the way to Jamestown. And Will is currently working on an extension, a 7.5-mile extension to connect Jamestown to downtown Williamsburg. And Will leads planning, community engagement, and intergovernmental coordination for this new extension. And he's been working in the outdoor industry for years and urban planning. And so we're glad to have him here to talk a little about the Capitol Trail today.
Thank you all for having me. I really appreciate it. As Valerie mentioned, I'm currently the Director of Trail Development for the Virginia Capitol Trail. Capitol Trail is a 51.7-mile multi-use trail. So similar to what's proposed here, it's separated from the right-of-way. It runs from Richmond to Jamestown and goes through a total of 4 municipalities. So along with Richmond and Jamestown, it also goes through Henrico and Charleston counties. The trail was fully completed in 2015. It would be kind of similar to what's being proposed here. So since we started in the same position that y'all are in right now, I did want to share some of the successes which we have associated with the Capitol Trail in the past decade of full completion. We've received strong support from local governments, local businesses, and local landowners. This is because the Capitol Trail is not just not a bike path. You know, it's a community. It's a place for people to walk, to bird watch, to see their neighbors. And so there are all sorts of social and physical benefits that I think we can all perceive from these trails. But along with those benefits, we also see a lot of economic success, and a lot of that is focused in small, local, privately owned businesses, and not just on the more populous Richmond and Jamestown end, but kind of centered in the middle of the trail, where it's significantly more rural. So, for example, in Charlottesville County, so you're 30 minutes from Richmond, you're 30 minutes from Williamsburg. One of our great partners at the Capitol Trail is Cole's Courthouse Grill. If you've ridden the trail, if you've gone through the middle section, you've probably stopped in there. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. And yeah, so that building was originally constructed in 1872. And so that family came in and they rehabilitated the building. And things were not going spectacular. And then the trail got finished. And all of a sudden, things have been going much better for them, up to the point where they've actually purchased the adjacent 1800s building as well. They're building a small Airbnb there. And so they attribute almost all of that success to their proximity to the Capitol Trail. And I think it's also important to note, like, you will always hear people talk about the economic benefits, the social benefits, the physical benefits. Benefits go beyond that. There's benefits that you don't really notice, but they're really great for small communities. One of the big benefits we see is access to historic sites along the trail. So along with providing access and context to some of those historic sites along the trail, we're actually working with some of the communities to refurbish some of these historic sites. So this would include, a 1920s farm or a 1920s two-room schoolhouse. It's been vacant for decades, and now we're working on a way to turn this into something that will serve community and trail. So I think finally, really maybe the best indicator of how good of a neighbor the Capitol Trail has been is that we're currently working on a 7.5-mile extension. So a lot of people think the trail runs from Richmond to Williamsburg. Don't say that to people from Williamsburg. It runs from Richmond to Jamestown. But we are planning on extending it now another 7.5 miles from Jamestown into Williamsburg. And so it's been 19 years since the first trailhead opened in Jamestown. And it's kind of funny that, we've gotten all the questions that y'all probably have, we got those the first time too. And now the two biggest questions that I get, so I'm leading that effort are, can the trail be closer to my neighborhood? And why does it take so dang long to build these things? So first, I would love to invite any of y'all who are interested in what multi-use trails look like, how they interact with your community, how they interact with land. Come on down. Come to Richmond, come to the peninsula, come check it out. You can go for a walk, bring your bike, you can rent an e-bike. If you don't want to do any of that, you can just drive down Route 5 and you can see the trail from it. It's a beautiful drive and I highly recommend it. Also, as Ali said, I'll be available in the next session. If y'all have any questions about how the trail has interacted with those immediately adjacent to it, please come up and ask. I'm more than happy to talk about the trail, as you may have noted. And I'd love to hear your thoughts, and I'm glad to answer any questions that y'all may have. Thank you.
Thanks, Rip. Thanks, Will. Great information. So let's talk a little bit about, we're getting ready to break back out into the open house. And everybody has already experienced, not everybody, but it looks like most people have already experienced this, which is good. So we just kind of want to go through where we are. We've got, as Henry mentioned, the corridor is broken into zones. So each station around the room is one of those zones. Afton over here, Charlottesville over here, so moving from west to east that way. And you can see at each station there's a map showing the route options in that zone. There's a board beside the map that provides some descriptive narrative and elevational details about each of the route options. And then the most important thing is that board on the right in this slide where you can leave your comments. Please tell us what you like, don't like, want to see changed for each route option in each zone. And if you just care about one zone and want to spend your time there, that's fine. If you want to work through all of them, that's great too. But please provide us that input. What do you like? What would you change? And what do you dislike? There's also a station about the evaluation criteria that Jeff went through. We want your help weighting these criteria. Which are the most important? Which of these evaluation criteria should we give more weight to than the others? And that's not to say that the ones you don't vote for aren't important. All of these criteria are important and will become factors in how we choose the preferred route. But we want to know which ones are most important to you. So we'll do that open house exercise. We'll take the information we get here tonight. We'll take the information we get from online input that I'll talk about in just a second. We'll be present in the community throughout December and throughout January, getting more input. We'll continue our technical analysis, take all of that, and work from these route options to a single preferred route for the corridor. And we will come back and present to you and start the discussion about prioritization and phasing. Everything that you see tonight, all of the displays, will be available online. So you can snap the QR code or just go to the Engage Albemarle site. There's a spot on there for the Three Notch Trail Master Plan. There will be a new questionnaire and a new version of the virtual room. I've got a screenshot of the virtual room here. The virtual room has stations that look exactly like the ones you see here, and we'll have a questionnaire that allows you to comment on each zone. So provide us your feedback tonight, but if you want to take time, review all this stuff online, provide us comments online, that'll be available through the end of January. We're going to try to get the virtual room up and running tonight, but it might be tomorrow. So give us some patience if you go online tonight and don't see the new virtual room. It will be up tomorrow, and again, it has all of these graphics as well as a questionnaire to give us your input and help us pick the preferred route. I want to emphasize two things really quickly. We'll leave this overall corridor map up on the screen as you're working through the stations. But as Henry said, if you see a route that looks like it's on a road, it's just that that option follows the roadway corridor. It's not on the road. We would be separated from vehicular traffic. Also, if you see a route that appears to follow a railroad, the idea is to generally follow that corridor but be outside of the rail right-of-way. There are some deed restrictions associated with that rail right-of-way that prevent us from building a trail in the rail right-of-way. So in some cases, we want to follow that corridor, particularly to save us some topography, but that would be adjacent to the rail right-of-way, not despite what it might look like on the map. With that, please join us back at the stations, have some fun, ask us some questions, and leave us your feedback, and visit the Engage Albemarle site and help us out with feedback online as well. Thanks again.